I'm fine, thanks. And thank you for inviting me to speak with you.
No worries at all. You were involved in the science and research behind what exactly?
My colleagues and I study the furry fandom, people who refer to themselves as furries. There are people who are really interested in what are called anthropomorphics. And anthropomorphics are basically what we think of as cartoon animals. So they're animals with kind of the human characteristics of being able to speak. And sometimes we think about it as zoomorphic, which means attributing animal traits to people. So, if you were at a furry convention, you would see some people in what are called fursuits. Think of that kind of like a mascot costume, except they're very unique. Each person creates their own what's called fursona. That's their furry identity. And that can be any kind of species that you can imagine, be it mythical or real. Lots of times it's a combination between one or more species. Most furries do not have that fursuit. They do have that furry identity, that fursona that they create, but fursuits themselves are very expensive. They're also quite uncomfortable to wear. You get really, really hot in a fursuit. So probably maybe 15 to 20% of furries have the fursuit, which is sort of probably what they're most known for, but it's a misconception to think that all furries have one.
Now, I know that there's Comic-Con that I've been to a few times where people dress up as anime characters. So it's similar to that.
But in another way it isn't. So one of the other things that my research team has been studying is anime and sort of comparing the difference between what happens and what anime fans do and what furry fans do. So in terms of the costuming, from what I understand, the anime fan would identify a character that they're fond of or interested in from a cartoon or a book or whatever, and they would try and recreate as faithfully as possible what that individual looks like or is supposed to look like. The furry, on the other hand, creates almost always a unique character, that unique unto themselves, that is distinctly different from virtually any other character. So it would be very rare, for example, to see a furry being Mickey Mouse or Donald Duck or Yogi Bear or any other kind of widely recognized existing character. They're going to try and be a unique individual.
So they're just creating some idea of quote unquote an animal. It doesn't have to be any specific breed or type or species. They're just creating some form of animal, whether it's real or fictional or fantasy or whatever.
Right. And sometimes it's a combination of more than one species. You could have, I've heard people say they're a cat and a rabbit. The most popular species tend to be various kinds of canine species, certain breeds of dogs, and also wolves, foxes, for example, coyotes, and also big cats are pretty popular, lions, tigers, leopards, cheetahs, that kind of thing. But the one species that you very rarely see is a primate species.
Okay.
So furries are very rarely, monkeys or gorillas or any other kind, orangutans, any other kind of primate. I guess if you're already a human, there's not much interest in being another kind of primate.
Can I ask you, so people who would identify as being furries and have this connection and this desire to express their creation of some form of animal, is this something they do at home, or is it mainly online, or is there specific meetups or groups where they're able to express this? How do they go about their days?
It's really a lot of both of those things. So they can have a meetup that's kind of a local situation. They might get together and go bowling, for example, or just go hang out, socialize with folks that are fairly close to them. There are, all over the world, conventions where you might find thousands of furries. For example, my research team goes to various conventions pretty much on a yearly basis. And the one that we are most closely associated with is Anthrocon, which has been held in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, every year since 2006. In 2006, there were about 2,400 people attending. And recently, 2019, I think it was well over 8,000 people attending.
So when you talk about the people who would go, let's say, bowling, are they then like dressed up, for want of a better word, in costume while they're just in their local bowling alley?
Yeah, they might do that. It's kind of, some bowling alleys actually set aside certain times for furry bowling. I haven't been to a furry bowling event, but I imagine it's pretty darn interesting because these costumes are kind of hard to wear.
Right.
The headpiece, can interfere with your vision. So being able to bowl, and the feet are like, it's hard to describe. If you could think of a really, really big slipper, some feet are way bigger than that. So thinking about somebody trying to bowl in a costume like that would be kind of entertaining to watch.
I imagine.
Now, you know the difference between anime, you were talking,
Yes.
Anime, they're picking a character, it could be anyone from Star Wars or Star Trek or something like that. Whereas with the furries, is it true that they actually do have part of their brain that thinks like an animal would, as opposed to being 100% human?
So you're kind of diverging a little bit into a different group that self-identifies not necessarily as furry. Some are furry, but some are not. And they're called Therians and Otherkin. So there's a little overlap between the two groups, but they're also very distinctive. So if you are furry, you would say that you identify with a particular species. If you were a Therian, you would say that you identify as a particular species. So we don't have any evidence whatsoever that their brains are different or anything like that. But we have done several focus groups, discussions. One of my colleagues, Dr. Elizabeth Fine, who's at Duquesne in Pittsburgh, has done a number of one-on-one interviews with these folks, and they really are more likely to say that they feel like this other species kind of trapped in a human body. We have no evidence that they're, crazy. That's not a technical term, but, they're out there, they have relationships, they're functioning, they're holding jobs, they're doing the kinds of things that the rest of us do, but they do have unique experiences that are quite different from the furries. They feel like they're kind of pretending being human, that they're kind of covering up their true self in order to fit in with the rest of society. But they're not furries.
Furries then, I'm sure when furries go out into public and bowling in the suits that they're in, they might come under a little bit of public scrutiny and might get a little bit of abuse from time to time. I'm sure you're more aware of this. What are some of the negative stereotypes and the wrong impressions that you have heard about furries in the community?
Well, that's kind of a hard question in that most people that I encounter don't know anything about furries. Right. So that's number one. Number two, if they think they know something about furries and they don't personally know a furry, they have been given a lot of misinformation by, various kinds of TV shows and stuff like that. And people, human beings in general, I'm a social psychologist, tend to be frightened, uncomfortable with anything that's unfamiliar. So, if they see somebody in a fursuit, or maybe more commonly a furry would just be wearing kind of like ears on a headband and maybe a tail, people, they's like, whoa, that's weird. What's that all about? So they think it's weird. When they find out more about it, when they meet a bunch of people that are furries, they often find that they're just, folks having fun, role playing whatever their character might be, hanging out with their friends, having a good time. If you go to a city that hosts sizable furry conventions, because I've been several times to the convention in Pittsburgh every year since 2007, and you talk to, like the hotel staff or restaurant people, that kind of thing, they pretty pretty uniformly have very positive things to say about furries.
Yeah.
Furry conventions typically designate a charity and raise lots of money during the time of their convention to donate, usually I think to a charity that's local to where the area is. So, it's weird. I mean, people like to make fun of things they don't understand. That's bottom line.
Yeah, I suppose, listen, I've never really heard much about it at all. There was the one thing that you're talking about, TV shows. I think CSI did an episode on furries years ago, and that was my only introduction into it. And I was like, okay, and it seemed to be painting a picture as a very underground, seedy kind of sexualized, for want of a better word.
That's what I was going to say, like more of a fetish.
That was maybe around 2003 or something. I think 2001, there was a Vanity Fair article, and that was the first time that I ever saw anything in print about furries that really was a horrible misrepresentation of what the fandom is all about. So if you combine the CSI episode and that Vanity Fair article, which was titled something like Pleasures of the Fur, yes. Right. And the CSI episode was Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, if I remember. So that gives you this, this, it's all about sex kind of thing. But we don't have any evidence from our studies that that's at all a true representation. It's about common love of anthropomorphic art. There's an amazing amount of creativity in the fandom. They're very interested in drawing and costuming, role playing, just lots and lots of creativity. You never see two costumes that look alike.
When you say role play, are you talking about they're acting their character? They're acting like a dog, or they're acting like a cat?
Yeah, they act out their character. It's fairly unusual for someone in a fursuit to talk. It'd be kind of hard to understand them probably, because they'd be talking kind of through this muffled headpiece. But they do a lot of acting out, hugging, pantomiming, that kind of thing. Kids that I've seen love meeting people in, furries in their costume, because it's so much fun.
Totally different and sounds interesting.
Yeah, I wonder if there's anyone, if there's a furry community in Dublin that you know. If you drop us a WhatsApp, let us know if you're listening. Either you're in the community or know someone who is. 087 679 104. So is it kind of in not in a weird way, but obviously guys and girls follow a sports team. They want to emulate them. They'll buy their jerseys as a kind of signal that that's the part of the tribe they're with, the community they're with. Similar enough in that it's just with animals, and they're putting on tails and bunny ears.
Yeah, we all have things we do that we do because we're fun, that we're interested in. It could be, like you say, you're a fan of a sports team, or I don't know, maybe you collect toy trains or Barbie dolls, or whatever it is. You enjoy getting together with people that share your interests, so that you have something that you can talk about. A lot of furries really kind of get connected through the internet as teenagers, sort of. They, say, well, I'm really interested in this. Maybe I'm the only one that is. And then it's pretty easy these days to go online and find out that, wow, there are all these other people that are interested in what I'm interested. I want to hang out with them. It'll be fun.
So, I mean, so as you said, they're perfectly normal, functioning members of society. They have jobs, they have families, they have friends. They're not locked away in a cupboard somewhere, weirdos. They're perfectly normal.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of them tend to be younger. They're not, the main age group that we see is, late teens through 20s. Because of research ethics, we can only have people do surveys or interview people that are 18 or older.
Right.
But I know from, for example, an online study that is not done under university auspices, and anybody who wants to can participate apparently, something like 40% of their participants were 19 or younger. So we know that from our research, we don't capture that younger age group. And when you think about teenagers, one of their main cognitive jobs is kind of figure out who they are. Finding a group that you feel comfortable with is an important part of that. We know also that a higher percentage of individuals in the furry fandom tend to be on the autism spectrum than you would find in the general population. They also tend to have a non-traditional sexual orientation. And we don't know exactly why this is, except that we know that one of the norms within the fandom is that you're supposed to be accepting of other people. So we don't know if people are kind of drawn to the fandom because they know that it's a safe place to be. That's a possibility. Interestingly to me, and I don't know why this is, but vast majority of furries tend to be males. Something like maybe about 80% of furries are guys. I don't get it. We don't have a reason that explains that, but it's a fairly consistent finding across many, many samples, whether they're convention samples, online samples, whatever. So guys are more drawn to it than girls. Also, we find amongst the fandom, they have a higher history of having been bullied than other people. So again, it's being in the furry fandom is kind of a safe place to be.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I'm sure there is a community here in Dublin that we just don't know about.
Yeah.
There probably is. You could go online and Google pretty easily where are conventions and cons. You might even find meetups or hangouts. You might get some people that call in if they know, that you're not going to give them a hard time. They might be willing to call in. Can I just add one thing?
Go for it, yep.
My research team has a website. It's www.Furscience, one word, FURscience.com. And we have resources there. We have a list of our publications. We have a book there that represents, it's free, 5 years of research findings. So anybody that's curious, that wants to know the real information about furries, they're welcome to visit our website.
Lovely. Well, listen, Kathleen Gerbasi from Furscience.com. Thanks a million for popping on.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure.
Yeah, and we'll chat to you again soon.
Okay, take care. Bye-bye.